quick hit on the game of Runes. It's actually 2 games in one. There's a solo play and an opposed play. And the opposed play, and there's some relationship between them, but essentially they're totally different games. I'm going to do a quick hit because the opposed play is the more interesting game, although both are kind of cute. I mean, the solo's a puzzle, basically, an ever-changing puzzle. So, let's talk. This is an Eon game, and Eon was always very clever with, the things they do. And this is a fairly different take on the idea of a word game, but maybe not all that different. Think the closest relation that I can consider for this is actually Foil, the 3M game, where you're handed a handful of cards and you create a couple of words out of those cards, scramble them up, and then the other players have to guess what the words are. This is kind of similar. In this game, you're going to be secretly picking a word of a certain length, and the people have to kind of play hangman towards that word. They don't just pick a letter, they pick pieces of a letter. So basically what you have is, for each player has one of these sheets, and they're going to have the different formations of the letters here. And then the words are, the amount of letters in the word is chosen. 5 is their suggested, but for a simpler game you can play with less letters. You can go up to 6, and the game might support more letters for longer word letters, especially in small number of players. These aren't all the pieces there are. This is about half the piece set. I got a couple more here a couple more sheets of them that I haven't punched yet, because just my wife and I have played so far. I'm not going to be doing a playthrough for this, not even the solo, which I could do. Obviously, the base game you can't do a solo play of, but the solo rules you could, obviously, but they don't look terribly interesting. I'll go into them. So the way you start the game, the way you decide who's going to go first, is each player makes up a word, a 3-letter word. So, for example, the first time I played it, I put put, P-U-T. And they take the pieces that align with that. So if we look at these, P will be a long red in one of these. U is going to be a little green and 2 of these short pieces. And then T will be a long red and a little one of these. It would be kind of cool if they were different colors like they are. And then what you do is you hand this set of this 3-letter word that you've got kind of scrambled up to the player on your left, and they have to assemble a word, any word from it. Doesn't matter whether they get your word or not. If they get a word, whoever gets a word first when it's handed around gets the right to go first. Then you throw these suckers back. They also get a 3-point bonus. And scoring in this game, you start at 0, they'd mark it like this. And you rotate around, positive and negative. It's got a nice little track. That way you don't have to worry about trying to keep track of the score on paper. You could, of course, and if you go above 50 or below negative 25, you're going to have to. The goal of the game is to get to 25 points and solve someone's word. Let me make sure. After you reach that 25 points. In the 2-player game, things are just a little teeny bit different. You have to get to 25 points and have solved someone's word already, and then solve someone else's word. So yeah, the ordering is kind of important. Because in terms of the victory, and that could come into play. You could end up solving someone's word, getting a lot of score off that, but not have been at 25 before that. And now, if you solve a word, you're able to win the game there. Okay, so how do you actually play the game? The way you play is the person who starts with this 3-point bonus, gets to select a piece. Well, first, everybody writes down a word that they want other people to try to guess. So for example, and it has to be a 5-letter word base. It could be 3, 4, or 6 if you wanted to make the game simpler or harder. In my case, the first time and only time I've played, I put down thigh, which seemed like a good choice of a word for various reasons. My wife picked fifth, F-I-F-T-H, which is kind of cool because it has a triple consonant on it. That kind of worked nicely as well. Anyway, but the choice of your words is largely the value of a word is largely based on the psychology of your opponents more than anything else. Now, obviously, if they don't know the word at all, it's probably a very powerful choice to win the game, but I would rather avoid playing with words where you're trying to trick someone into not because they don't have the vocabulary or whatever, for various reasons. I mean, you know, there's technical terms in every field, and if you start using those things, you can blow people away. So I kind of like to aim for commonly used words. Scrabble Dictionary is not a great choice for that because it's filled with all kinds of arcana. Probably the best thing would be kind of like a children's dictionary, to tell you the truth. One that isn't very complete. Okay. So anyway, everyone writes down a word, and then the first player gets to start, and he picks someone else's board and puts a piece down. Now, if that piece is part of a letter in the right position, he can put it anywhere in any letter box in any player's positioning. If that is part of the correct space, and let's take a look at my thigh word here. So thigh, fourth letter, does not have, it has a G. G doesn't have one of these long reds. So that would be a no. If you say no to someone, their turn ends, this piece goes here, and everybody now knows there's no more of that piece in that letter, in that position. Also, the person who got who got incorrectly guessed against gets a point of their own. So this guy would go to 1 point at this point. Okay. And then now it would rotate, and if we're going clockwise, it would rotate to the next player who would then get to make their own guesses. What if instead, though, I had picked here, where it's correct? Well, he would say yes or score to say, yeah, there's that piece in that letter in that position. And the player who made the correct guess gets a point. Remember, you're wanting to get to 25 along with being able to solve a word after you get to 25. Although you have to solve a word first in the two-player version, like I said, before you can solve a word to win. Okay, so that would mean this player would get to go again and put another letter down. Now that's the main placement, is just putting these pieces down. The another thing you can do is, let's take this. Let's say I have this here, and we've gotten to this point. Now there's no letter that's shaped that way, but let's say I think it might be an H, but I want to know for sure. As my move for the turn, or as one of my moves on my turn, which can be said yes or no to, I can move this down and turn it into, into the right position for that piece. And I'm told yes or no on that. Now, nobody scores any points for something that just moves a piece around, but you can lose your turn on a no there. The final thing that you can do, which doesn't have to be on your turn, is you can call out that you're solving somebody's word. You can solve anybody's word, and this is kind of a speed or dexterity element. You could change that rule so it's not that way, so you can only solve on your own turn or something. And what you do is you declare which word you think you've got. Now, let's say I had this, and I said, I think it's hater. And if it's hater, I will get the number of points equal to all the pieces that make up that word, and that gets scored on mine. If I was already above 25 when I declared that, I might have won the game, right? The other thing, if it's not correct, I will lose the number of points equal to the word that I guessed. You might have to calculate this out. So you'd be like hater 3, and 3 is 6, and T is 2, that's 8, and 4 is 12, and R is 3, that brings me to 15, so I'd lose 15 points. And you can go negative, you can whatever, The scores are not limited by the chart, although they give plenty of room on that. And this is a really tough game, like Foil. It's probably a little easier than Foil. But anyway, you just keep going around until somebody meets their victory conditions, and you go, and that's it. The solitaire game, which I have not played and will not play, although it's cute, is as follows. It's kind of like that starting situation for the game. What you do is you flip to a page and pick the first 4 or 5, 6-letter words, whatever, spell them out with the little rune pieces, set yourself a timer, they suggest 15 minutes, and then try to create new words. So let's take this for example, 4-letter word, 5-letter words. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's go with 4-letter words. So your turn. So your would be the first one. So I look up Y. Y would be like this. O. I'd set this. U. Now, it's not guaranteed that you can succeed with this, which is a problem, perhaps. And let's see, R has a little blink. Okay, and then I would write turn out here because that's the next word that I'd have, right? Just to give you an idea of what this would end up like. Let's get this done kind of quickly. Okay, and my goal, you got to check the letters. N has 3 of these. I'd have all 4 boards filled out here. My goal would be to come up with 4 new words here if I can. Well, turn is pretty damn easy. I can just turn that. I don't have to even change the letters into runt without any difficulty at all. And I've made a different word, and look, I succeeded with this one. Great. Okay, so your, though, that might be difficult, right? I don't see anything that I can do real quickly with letters, so then I start looking, and I have to use all the pieces, and this is where it gets kind of hard. So let's say I take well, it gets really hard. Oh, I have a Q here. That's kind of good. I can use that with the U maybe. No, it gets kind of hard, right? I mean, if I had an I, right? But I don't. I could do Q-U-U-T. That's not a word. All right, maybe this isn't the best idea. And it's got to be the same number of letters as I had to begin with. So that makes it a little bit more difficult. See, how about a C, R, U, but now I have something that doesn't work. And you can see how this could be really, really difficult, and it's not necessarily the case that it's probably easier to do it with longer words than with shorter words. I got lucky with this one. This one, I'm not sure. I've got an S here that I could make. Those tend to be pretty useful. But then I have a lot of these. So let's see. An S is like this, right? So I could do an O. This isn't gonna work either. An X. Okay. What do I get if I do this? There's nothing that uses just 2 of these. If I had a long instead of a couple of these shorts, I could do soft. And you can see, whether it's easy or not. The main problem I have here is these little ones. I can use a lot of little ones on an E, but then I don't end up with what I need. You know, I could do an O or a G or something like that, but that's not really helping me. So this was probably a bad letter combination. Anyway, that gives you a quick idea of how it plays. Let me swing around and give you some FaceTime, I guess. Whee! I don't know how much difference it makes, you know, to do this. Let's make sure it's still in focus somewhat. Right. Okay. So, yeah, I found this to be one of the more clever little word games out there. Unlike Scrabble, or well, so depending on how you play it, this could really be a vocabulary taxer. The same way foil is, but foil is interesting because you don't have to come up with the word that your opponent came up with. In this game, you actually have to guess the right word. If you find a word that matches, you know, even if you've filled out all the pieces or whatever, and you're never sure that you've done that unless you exhaust, you know, all possibilities. But you might have other words that match what they're saying. Like in a Wheel of Fish, a Wheel of Fortune, you have to get the actual word, not phrase, but the actual word that is set up there. You can't just do something that is right for what you see. In foil, what you're given, you just have to make something there. And if you make a word, even if it's not what the player had selected, well, you still win, right? If you unscramble it to any word, you win, which is kind of the solo exercise to this. Hey, here's a word. Now try to make another word out of it, and that may not be even possible. I'm not sure whether the one I did was or not. It was definitely taxing and not something I thought I could complete on the camera. So anyway, slightly different skill set for what you need for foil. Obviously, if you don't have a sufficient vocabulary to play this, compared to the other players, you're in trouble. I think it's probably best not to try to push somebody's vocabulary too far with this. I would aim more for common words rather than trying to win by having a larger vocabulary. What do I think of this? I think it's pretty cool. I don't think it's as good a game as foil, and it's a hell of a lot rarer and harder to find, and therefore probably, unless you're willing to get a beat-up copy like mine, probably fairly expensive. Whereas foil, you can probably pick up for under $1, you know, at a tag sale or something. Certainly, you've been able to. Recently, all those prices have shot up, so people go and grab them and bring them and try to resell them on eBay or whatever. And probably can get $5 or $10 for it. I don't know if it's worth the effort to do that, to tell you the truth, but some people seem to think it is. This is going to be harder to find, but you know, if you do like word games, especially ones that... See, Scrabble's not really a word game. That's one of my feelings about it. Scrabble's a game more about the positioning and grabbing the score points and knowing your two-letter words, you know, great. So that you can extend a line next to another line and stuff like that very easily. So that ends up being kind of a less vocabulary-based one. Foil vocabulary is very important. It could be tremendously important. In fact, I consider it kind of too important. So I would look at it as not cheating, but taking too much advantage of one particular skill set. And that's one of the things that I see that I think it's a little less exciting about. I think you'd want to play it with people who who have either a large shared vocabulary that they kind of agree to use, or who, if they have a technical vocabulary or whatever, try to delimit it so that they're not reaching outside of that shared vocabulary or whatever it is. And you could actually put limitations like, right, you can only use words that are, I don't know, you know, commonly used in diagnoses or something like that. I don't know. But there's a lot of room for playing around with this, just as there is with some of the others. It's kind of neat. Foil, the deck of cards, is based on the distribution in the language. Scrabble, the points are based on distribution in the language. Most word games that I know have that disadvantage. This one doesn't, although one person did note in their comments, doesn't work in other languages, and he was a German person, and I wondered why. My wife pointed it out very quickly. Well, they have like the umlaut, and they have the Schloss and whatever. It's like, yeah, you have to be using the same character set this was designed in, or make some allowances. So, for example, you know, if you're doing a Spanish set, hey, N and Enya would be, right, both represented by the same letter, perhaps. And you could probably do the same thing with the Schloss, with the umlaut, whatever. And that's kind of, I don't know, it's not that bad a fudge for something, because there's no particular points associated with the letters. There's a little bit of difficulty with the letters, because just how many pieces make them up, and that increases their points. But it really has very little to do with anything except the physical structure of the characters. And you could actually make additional pieces if you needed to. The game supports two characters that aren't letters. It supports the apostrophe, which would allow you to do something like BOY apostrophe S as a 5-letter word. An apostrophe would be a really fucking hard thing to guess, because it would just be a short stab, and you'd have to basically put everything else out there to realize you've just got an apostrophe. I is tough the same way. Pretty much, yeah. The other, the hyphen, I don't know how many hyphenated 5-letter words where the hyphen's a word. So basically you'd have 2 letters and 2 letters and a hyphen in the middle. I don't know how many of them are available. But again, that would be similar to the apostrophe. If you have something like that, and I guess like, I don't know, you could say like aha has a hyphen in it or something. You'd have to come to some sort of agreement as to what words apply with a hyphen. And both the hyphen and the apostrophe seem like pretty tough additions, but maybe they're needed for balance. We didn't find, we kind of played with sort of an understanding that we weren't going to use them, and it worked fine. But, you know, it opens up the game state space. You could make additional pieces as well, and additional letters, and just add them to it, and it wouldn't really make it that much more difficult. So, for example, you could have, I don't know, a generic accent or something like that. You probably don't want to use the same pieces, but it depends on what the language is. You could fiddle around and change things a bit. I would try to use it with the same character set they give you, and maybe drop the apostrophe and the hyphen, although maybe they're good. Set this up, real quick hit. Sorry, no playthrough. I give you a little bit, right?